There is a fundamental problem that is shared both by Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, and that is the trap of sustain. Hello everybody, my name is Abby. Welcome to the video. Quick note before I jump into it, more than half of you are watching the videos, but not all of you are subbed. Guys, if you're coming back to watch the videos, but you're not subscribed, hitting the subscribe button helps you keep up to date with everything. Now with that out the way, let's talk about the sustainability problem. And is this a curse that hero shooters in general cannot escape from? So the first thing that I want to talk about is that, well, to some extent, whether we like it or not, a game to some degree should have sustainability. It allows fights that would otherwise be really, really fast to be just over before they even start to some degree. So sustain comes in to perhaps slow down the game to a certain degree, resource trades to happen, and then from there, after an exchange between a set of players, the one that comes out on top or finds an opportunity in between is going to win that team fight. That's actually the nature of the game and how it's always played. This can be seen in Overwatch. This can also be seen in games like Paladins. I know Paladins leaned in a little bit more towards the MOBA side, a bit deeper than Overwatch, but they also had some issues during certain metas where this was a thing, with sustain becoming a problem over there for like I think a season or two. Then with Marvel Rivals, obviously the one that stands out the most without a doubt is the Luna Loki comp. Now, to be fair, to give credit where it's due, I'm going to give some credit to Overwatch and I'm going to give some credit to Marvel Rivals, and I'm going to dig deeper into the problem with both games. Now, first of all, I actually want to talk about Overwatch a lot. There's a lot of discussion that happens within the Overwatch sphere, which I feel like to some degree there's a little bit of disingenuous commentary that happens within there, where they're like, well, Overwatch's sustain isn't that bad, and to that I make an argument that, first of all, I just find it so hilariously convenient how everybody forgot how Overwatch was playing before season 9, because supports' healing was so incredibly absurd that literally nothing could die. I still remember a lot of the clips that came out from season 8 and prior to that, and the way that Overwatch 1's is post GOATS era functioned as well, with how much power supports had within their role. Now on the other side, as I continue talking about this, is Overwatch has cleverly over time divided sustain in different ways and also offered a temporary solution. It's a band-aid solution, but the pain points begin to come up when this band-aid solution isn't present. First of all, the band-aid solution is the DPS passive that reduces the healing by a certain percentage. Now, this is actually nice, but the condition here is that you need to have a DPS reducing the healing upon a target. And if you are playing tanked support, especially nowadays, if you're playing tanked support and you don't have the DPS passive, you will 100% feel that heal creep that has happened in the game, to where you will actually just sit there and feel like, wow, nothing dies. That's actually one of the reasons why at the moment in the current season, Winston and D.Va can feel a little bit more frustrating to play, because they technically don't really have high burst damage until D.Va gets to at least her major perk with the rockets, assuming you're building it then in that direction. And if you don't have the DPS passive, you can definitely feel how ridiculously difficult it can be to get a kill, especially also if you're playing support, and of course supports don't get the benefit of the DPS passive, and then yeah, you start to feel that, oh crap, this sucks, right? However, there is credit that is to be given to Overwatch, is that yes, they have created that DPS passive that helps out, but again, it's a bandage solution when in reality they should be directly addressing the state of healing in the game, and then accordingly they can tone down damage where it's a little bit silly. In my personal opinion, damage also should be addressed on the support and tank role, because one of the reasons why the DPS role lost its identity way back in season 8, 7 and all of that was simply because the tanks and the support roles could do everything that the DPS role did, but even better. I'm not saying that supports and tanks shouldn't be allowed to have good breakpoints, but there needs to be some sort of trade-offs. Right now it feels like though both those roles have a lot more going for it than the DPS passive, and the DPS passive to some degree on certain characters in Overwatch, characters like Pharah and Junkrat, it doesn't even feel like that passive comes up for them, and that's a different topic for a different day. Now, moving on over to Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals much prefers the direct approach, but in my opinion, they decided to address the wrong characters when it's come to the sustained topic. I think the easiest one to talk about is Mantis. In Season 0 and Season 1, Mantis was a character that was being slotted in and out amongst a variety of compositions. However, the strength of Mantis actually came with the ultimate and not necessarily her mid-fight sustain. Her mid-fight sustain cannot even stack, quote-unquote, healing. It increases the duration and gives a small burst if you toss it to another target. So it's, I hope you understand, it stacks the duration but not the healing that is then applied after the initial burst comes out. So there's no burst stacking, but there's quote-unquote soft heal over time stacking that like lasts a little bit more of a duration. I'm really bad at explaining the way Mantis's healing works. It's not the burst healing the same way that characters like Luna and Loki work. So anybody that's played Mantis will understand what I'm talking about. So Mantis was the wrong character to address because even way back then, Luna was the character that had the most power when it came to sustain. In fact, she's still the #1 culprit today. Progressively over time through Marvel Rivals' lifespan, even Invisible Woman, Invisible Woman's ultimate just kind of aged like spoiled milk because people realize not only does it not necessarily heal that much, the ultimate is just there to provide some extra utility. It does help with the healing output, but Invisible Woman was a step in the right direction because out of all the sustain-based ultimates in the game, she actually feels like she is the most balanced version of it all. It's a very short duration, I think max 6-7 seconds. It comes up and before you know it, halfway through a team fight, it's gone. So it's there for a certain duration, and that should be the benchmark on how these type of ultimates should work. Mantis is also another character where, you know, if you are leaning into the defensive support ultimates and things like that, well, Mantis's case, it's her ultimate is pretty much just a Lucio sound barrier if you think about it. Then on the other side, you have Cloak and Dagger's ult that's been messed around with quite a bit, but C&D's ultimate is still pretty damn strong. It's not on the level of Luna, I would argue, but it still comes up, and it certainly has a long duration because if I'm not mistaken, C&D's ultimate does last, I think, around 10 to 12 seconds, but there's a little bit more windows for counterplay because it's really fast healing over time and not necessarily burst healing, like I said with the Luna Snow ultimate that is pretty much a 12-second transcendence, which is way too ridiculous, right? Now, the thing here is that the reason that they have allowed supports to have this strong sustain in the mid fight, in the neutral, and in the ultimate is because it's counteracted by the fact that DPS also have, or even tanks in this matter, have incredibly strong ultimates that can shut down a fight before it stops. A great example from the tank role that they've been trying to balance out, which to be fair now he's a lot more balanced than where he was in season 1, was Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange was a character that could single-handedly carry the game by himself simply because of his incredible design of how much of a fun tank he used to play. He's a poke brawl hybrid. Most of the rivals tanks are poke brawl hybrids, kind of similar to Overwatch now, and he pretty much just has a beefier version of Earthshatter, and I'm sure you guys know that a 360 Earthshatter that upon dropping into the right situation, hitting everybody with one of those ultimates and then shutting down the fight immediately is a very nice way to win the team fight very quickly. And at least back in the day in season 1, Doctor Strange could also burst through the healing ultimates in the game. So they had to tone down the damage a little bit because let's be a little bit realistic here, that was a little bit too much, right? He's still a tank at the end of the momentum killing is already good enough. The fact that he could just instantly one-shot people right after was a little bit silly, and he can definitely do that now, but he needs to take a couple of 1 or 2 extra steps to get there. So I'm okay with that. I think that's the area where tank is pretty healthy right now. Same thing with Magneto's ultimate. Magneto's ultimate is just evolved beautifully into the game where it's become a great counteract tool that can shut down Luna and especially C&D ultimates, because C&D's zones are always leaving behind damage marks that is getting sucked up by Magneto to attack him. My point is that in both games, depending on how you want to look at it, there is ways you can trade the concept of quote-unquote sustain. Now, is it perfect in either game? No, of course not. Because on one side, in Overwatch for the past couple of seasons now, as discovered by my good friend Lucigo, we discovered that armor has been ridiculously bugged. And progressively over time, as the metas kind of shifted and changed, people realized that characters that could block actually created a very, very unhealthy gameplay loop of block botting that, again, I've dug deeper into this in another video, so I'm just gonna talk about the end conclusion. And the end conclusion is that Overwatch is kind of in a state where their meta tank gameplay and support gameplay is, well, a slightly bit more heal body this season to keep the tank up, but you have characters like Ramatra, Hazard, and Orisa, where because they're able to abuse the state of #1 bugged armor and #2 bugged blocking, it creates a situation where the tank just takes no damage whatsoever, and it can feel incredibly frustrating. One of the reasons I actually much prefer the sustain issues in Rivals compared to Overwatch is that the problem with Overwatch's sustain is, like I said, they over time cleverly divided sustain across the two supports plus the tank rather than just the two supports. But the problem now is because in 5v5 we have Giga Tanks, the tank brings the impact of almost 2 to 3 players depending on if it's a meta tank or not. So if that tank understands how to suck up the resources and trade out resources much better than the other tank, you can easily hyper carry games because not only because tanks like Ramatra have good breakpoints, they have very strong ultimates, a very good neutral potential, neutral gameplay potential, and it becomes really difficult to deal with these characters. And most of the games in Overwatch can just boil down to who has the better tank, simply because, well, we are playing the meta and that guy doesn't want to play the meta, and he's feeding on cooldown because he's not benefiting from the state of sustain in the game. And well, Ramatra, Orisa, and Hazard is etc. etc. I think you guys understand where I'm coming from with this. Now, on the flip side in Marvel Rivals, the opposite also happens. Is, for example, if your supports are choosing not to play hyper sustain, or at least one main healer in the team comp, let's argue Cloak and Dagger and Luna are honestly the only real offenders, because I will be a little bit realistic. They have nerfed healing over time on the other characters. I cannot for the life of me argue that Ultron, Mantis, even Invisible Woman have really good high heal potential. It's mostly just down to Cloak and Dagger, Luna, and to be honest, Loki. And if they're able to address that, you know, there is a chance that the game can feel even better. But I think the balance of the game has gotten much better compared to Season 1 to where it is now. And I think it's only going to get better because they made it very clear that they understand the frustration with the player base. But there's also that small problem with Luna Snow, that she was made by the senior game producer way back in Marvel Future Fight, which was a phone game. So it's obvious Luna Snow is a bit of a pet character for the senior producer behind Marvel Rivals. And, well, if they are able to grow the player to nerf her, I would have a lot of respect for them. But at the same time, if, you know, she's that close to the senior producer, it can be understood why she's dodging the most nerfs. Because an argument could be made right now that in Marvel Rivals, genuinely the only really broken characters left is Loki and Luna, to the degree of their balanced cadence. This is really important to understand, that Marvel Rivals and Overwatch approach their games and their balance from a very different perspective. And when we are trying to have these conversations, we should individually look at, well, what does the game want to achieve? I feel like it's so stupid when people say that Marvel Rivals should go to the Overwatch balance route, because it doesn't make sense. That's not the type of game that they want to make, right? That's not the type of game that they're trying to curate. And hey, newsflash, that's fine, because that's how that game will maintain its own identity. That's how that game will maintain its own player base, and that's how it's that game can then further evolve, maybe doing things differently, that, you know, it can then perhaps help teach Overwatch some concepts about, you know, whatever they learn. And then on the flip side, you also have Overwatch teaching, you know, Rivals some concepts like, hey, you know, you can also add a heal reduction or an anti-heal, because that's literally what they just did with their latest character Blade, right? So I think these two games that are similar and complementary to one another should stay in different balance paths. In fact, when it comes to Marvel Rivals, I do want them to be on the a little bit sillier side. I think there's a limit where silly becomes a bit stupid. We shouldn't let it get to the stupid mark. We should let it be in the silly mark. Then on the Overwatch side, Overwatch has wanted to be more of a quote-unquote competitive game, but Overwatch's problem is that they don't really have a balanced philosophy that they commit to, because like every other season or every mid-season, they go back on something that they said they wanted to commit on. A great example of this was Season 9, then the Kaiju Watch tanks, then how breakpoints worked in the game, and then how perks just outright power crept the game. And I have a video coming up very soon in the coming days called, you know, why I'm okay with power creep in Overwatch now, because I think there's no escaping it, and we'll talk about that in tomorrow's video. But the ending conclusion, the last thing that I want to talk about, I want to kind of set the stage. It's a really big stage to talk about sustain across both games, being honest and fair to both sides, rather than Overwatch sucks or Marvel Rivals sucks. It's really stupid when people make these arguments, because on one side you have somebody who's not played Rivals since like Season 1, you have somebody who's not played Overwatch since Season 8, and both sides are just getting information wrong. I've been playing both games constantly, so I feel like I can give a little bit more of a fair assessment. And of course, I have not been able to cover everything in Overwatch's side. I've not been able to cover everything in Marvel Rivals' side. I'm just giving like some popular examples and trying to, you know, get that baseline out. Now, with that being said, is this curse of sustainability escapable for the hero shooter genre? And I have a very disappointing answer. I don't think it's possible because at the end of the day, one way or the other, you need sustain in the game, because when it comes to a lot of lower level players or mid level players, people like it when their mistakes are not immediately punished and they're able to outlive something that they should have died to. They could survive. On the other side, a lot of casual support players and a lot of low elo support players, even in Overwatch till this day, just simply enjoy the concept of heal botting, and to some degree, obviously, like, they want that feeling of, well, this is my primary job. I want to feel like when I land my shots with Ana and I'm healing a tank, I'm able to out heal the damage. Maybe that's how I get my high. On the flip side, tanks might like the idea that, well, I was about to be punished for a mistake, but now I can outlive this situation and I can use my ultimate. I can earth shatter them now. I can go crazy with my diva bomb now. I got the angle I needed, and that's a sustained thing that's been there in the game for Overwatch. That perhaps this is the reason why they quote unquote try to cleverly divide it across the two different roles. And again, I do kind of want to dig deeper into this problem for Overwatch's side in a future video than a Marvel Rivals, because we know Marvel Rivals is a more casual focused game. They've already admitted to this. They obviously understand this as well, as that, well, we know that support players, and it's obvious, like, people flame Lifeweaver, Moira, and Mercy mains in Overwatch, but that's exactly the gameplay style that those type of players like, right? Is that they want to lean into the heal botting nature of characters. Now, in Rivals, we do have two types of supports. We do have the off supports that do a lot of damage but not a lot of healing. There's actually a lot more of that in Rivals than there is main healing supports. An argument can be made that truly the only real main healing supports at the moment in Rivals is Luna Snow, Loki, and Cloak and Dagger. Invisible Woman has kind of fallen off because they've reworked how her healing works. So she kind of gets played in that little off support, off healer type position nowadays, not necessarily when she released. So she's a lot more, a lot less sustainy than she used to be. So again, it's interesting because, again, Cloak and Dagger, Luna, Loki, these are characters that are being seen a lot in pro play, even in ranked. Like, as you climb up the ladder, these characters become a lot more popular. And people just have a playstyle preference that, well, it's the easiest thing to achieve. It's the thing that makes me feel good. Same thing on the other side with Overwatch. You have people that are locking in Moira, Mercy, Lifeweaver, etc., and they get that feeling of high that, I love the high healing. Baptiste has a history of high AoE healing sustained power and leaning into that playstyle. So I don't know if there is an escape when it comes to the sustainability problems, because at the end of the day, what I think the reason that they keep sustain strong in these games is to help the roles on tank and support feel better, because to some extent tanks need sustain in order to draw out fights so that they can make a play. Otherwise, if they step into main, they just blow up, right? And then on the other side, you have supports that if they are into the more healing playstyle, they want to lean into that because it gives them the healing of, well, I am the support. I am currently supporting my team. Now, of course, there's other ways to support your team. For example, the difference between a Cloak and Dagger that is in low elo versus high elo is actually pretty simple. The Cloak and Dagger in high elo actually understands that you can swap the cloak and then Discord wall the enemy team, blow up their tank, and then move in with your team. Unfortunately, the Cloak and Dagger in low elo is just stuck on Dagger 90% of the time, thinking the healing will help them out when they should be trying to make more proactive plays. Now, again, I still think both games at the moment have small issues that they can solve to make both games feel the same. Now, my personal vision to end this video is I'm okay with sustain to a certain degree as long as DPS are allowed to have certain breakpoints that can, if used correctly, can break through the healing. Overwatch is actually starting to go down this route. They started with Sojourn, they brought in Freya, then they leaned into Reaper and Tracer, and progressively over time, as you can see the trend in Overwatch, they are going in that direction. So kudos to Overwatch, because that is something that I do want. If they can do that for my boy Genji, I would really appreciate that. Hanzo got his breakpoints and even got a Giga buff to help him compete with the current state of the game. Progressively, as you can see in Overwatch, they are realizing that, okay, the only thing we can do if sustain in our game is strong, whether it's on the tank role or the support role, is give the DPS heroes power in their breakpoints. On the flip side, you have Marvel Rivals where the DPS already have good breakpoints, so it just becomes a little bit more focusy on the resource trading, and then once the resources are down, it comes down to the neutral fight and who's able to, well, pretty much just outplay the other person, right? So While Rivals is a little bit more on the silly end, I think the state of tank and DPS has gotten 10 times better than people want to give it credit for. In Marvel Rivals, I think the sustain of the state of Overwatch has also gotten much better than people want to give it credit for, albeit that there is still problems here and there in both games. I think both games can figure it out over time, but I also believe that, as much as I hate to say it, like when it comes to a business, and businesses are all about appealing to the people that give them the most money, I hate to say it, but the support role is literally predominant across gaming to being the role that brings in the most money. So even if you forget balance for a second, and every justification I put out why hero shooters cannot escape from the little sustain problem, then there's also the business side that support players across gaming, whether it's League of Legends, Overwatch, Paladins, Marvel Rivals, Dota, Apex, any game that has the like support role that is like aggressively about healing, or like slightly team utility focused, they are going to lean into the idea that, well, we want this role to feel good to play, otherwise people won't play. So looking at it from a business perspective, looking at it from a gameplay perspective, I just think, unfortunately, there's no escape. But I think there's a way to balance it out, and I'm okay if supports want to have the stronger healing points, as long as the DPS can have better breakpoints to deal with it when those resources are beginning to run out. That's my perspective on it nowadays. I've kind of changed it over time, because I don't see Overwatch nerfing itself. Rivals is a different case. I see Rivals actually committing to their philosophy, and at least in my opinion, I think objectively, outside of Luna, Snow, and Loki, Rivals has done very, very good balance with their roster, addressing a lot of problematic characters over time as they popped up in tournament play and pro play and high rank play. And then on the other side, Overwatch has done a decent-ish job with their support role, but they're kind of a little bit here and there when it comes to DPS and tank. And we do know there's a big shakeup coming for Season 18, so let's reserve judgment for that. But at the end of the day, I love both games, I play both games, and I just wanted to do my level best to provide a fair argument to both sides. Again, pre-Season 9, Overwatch plays super similarly to Marvel Rivals, and people just kind of conveniently forget that with the way the game used to play. And then over time, with the way that Overwatch has divided sustain very cleverly across the different roles, it's just like something that is still there, it's still strong, but it's divided in a way where, okay, it shouldn't all be on the support role that allows supports to do something else. I would also like to see that perhaps for Marvel Rivals, this particular main healing role is, I think, while C&D and Luna and Loki are very good at dealing damage too, the opportunity cost is just too high for them not to do that. Otherwise, on other support characters like Jeff, Ultron, Adam Warlock, these are characters that do end up, and Mantis especially, these are characters that can go for those off-angle plays, can go for those, well, I can just kind of, toss my healing over here, take a little bit of an aggressive play, an angle, make a play, and get out. And we actually even saw that a little bit in the tournament play for the MRI Marvel Rivals Ignite. So anyways, everybody, that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted to ramble on about the state of sustain in both games, and I wanted to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think about the state of sustain? Do you think this sustainability curse is escapable in hero shooters? Because I've just come to accept that I don't think it can happen. Like I think the reason they keep sustain strong one way or the other is to help the tank and the support role feel like it has an impact on a match. Otherwise, they just blow up to anything, right? And that's actually one of the most complained things that tanks talked about in 5v5. Or, we could have stayed in 6v6. Anyways, everybody, shout out to the patrons over here. I will see you in tomorrow's video.